Hey folks, Nick Tockert here with the Historical Fencing Guild. Before we get into it, I do need to pay some metaphorical bills, and hold on. Ding, there it is. We are made possible, of course, by our good friends over at the Independent Creator Directory. That's IndieCD.org, your one-stop shop for the best and the brightest authors, artists, and musicians. You can find wonderful people, myself included, on there. We are also made possible by sales of The Simple Sword, The Fighting Axe, and The Simple Spear, all part of my ongoing series of Western martial arts manuals designed to help you go from having never handled the sword to teaching the art to others, as well as, of course, the amazing folks at my Patreon. For as little as $1 a month, you help me gather up the funds to provide an ever-increasing and improving base of operations where I can teach people for free without them having to worry about finances, so that I can afford gear to review it so you don't have to. And the people are listed starting with Off in the Woods, Frog G, Ronald, Riehn, Bladed Thesis, Brian K. Morris, Cindy Koepp, Steve Agosto, Don Dulas, Angelina, Vaquera-Linke, and Trilaina, and Joe Bachman, which I keep saying I need to fix that, and I keep forgetting to fix my scroll. But one of these days, I will get that fixed. Now, we are also, for the folks who don't like to use Patreon for reasons, I can also easily accept funds via paypal.me/Nicholas Tockert. All right, let's get into it. We have some things we need to discuss. First and foremost, I need to bring it up because we had an important bit of news in that I was contacted by John Miner. John Miner is a longtime member of the Guild, a longtime friend to the Guild, and a longtime friend to me. To those who were paying attention, the 13th, he was in a severe motorcycle accident. Now, he has gotten to the point where he was able to contact me and give me a list of basically what happened, including 6 fractured ribs, broken collarbone, head and facial fractures, contusions, and a concussion due to a bruising of the brain. But he was able to get up on his own and walk to the side of the road, despite the damage he endured. He is currently going through assorted physical therapies, and his progress is, of course, something we are seriously thinking about and praying over deeply in our hearts. John, we hope you do you continue to recover. And with that, we can just hope to see you very, very soon. Okay. There is an overlap in my world between people who do assorted combat sports, be they Western martial arts. Oh God, I'm sorry, I'm so hot right now. Or BJJ, or MMA, Krav Maga, the works, and people who ride motorcycles. A lot of people I care about deeply ride motorcycles, and a lot of people I care about deeply ride bicycles regularly. Please be aware of them on the road. Also, under no circumstances should you operate any vehicle intoxicated to any level. There was a big ad campaign that said buzz driving is drunk driving, and it is. It might not be your life that is lost in an accident. So it's something I do have to open up and discuss severely. Pardon my rambling. One moment. because the cats walk through my screen door and I haven't gotten chicken wire up, it is well over 80 degrees in here. So I am one hot sword master. But I've always been one hot sword master. All jests aside, we do have some matters to discuss that are very important. I am on several HEMA community lists throughout Reddit and other things, and there has been a second failure of a Spez jacket. Another supposedly 350 Newton jacket has just simply torn during practice. Now, I don't know if that means that someone is putting out bootlegs. I don't know if there's something wrong at their end. This is all in the realm of allegation, and they're talking about it. The story was met immediately with a lot of implied that somebody cut it with a knife. Until I know for sure what's going on, I can't speak much to it, save what I was discussing earlier, which is the incredibly vital need for people to inspect their gear. Now, I do believe that organizations like HEMA need to develop a regular, consistent, and organization-wide punch test system to check for such things. I know I currently do not fence with steel, in part because of the tremendous heat of this time of year. Far more dangerous, in my point, than the training weapons we use. Now, that being said, I also have always engaged in the practice of using heavier rapiers. I very rarely fence with things like foils or epées. I don't know if I've ever actually owned an épée, come to think of it. I have fought with sabers, and I have fought with épées, but I don't think I've ever actually owned one. Because it never fit the logistics of the groups that I run in, which leaves me still chasing the what is the best, safest trainer. And we, as a group, basically have come to the conclusion that the polypropylene rapiers are the safest, all in all, and we are building towards being armored more towards longsword style combat than towards sharp weapons. The other thing that I do want to discuss that I realize isn't really driven home nearly as much when we look at the teaching and application of what I would consider a heavy rapier versus light rapier. And again, I'm borrowing SCA terms, or a Schlager, a practical rapier blade. Items like these all are, they have different primary weaknesses. And one of them is the concussiveness of a heavy rapier versus the concussiveness of something like a foil or épée. Even a saber as a slap is not hitting with the weight and penetration usually to be a major threat. But because foils flex so profoundly and absorb so much impact, it has been my observation that people who have fought foil or épée especially, and then attempt to fight heavy rapier, tend to have difficulties with not only the stamina of using a much heavier sword simulating object, because they all are, but the calibration and the precision of range is radically different between someone who has spent a lot of time behind a very rigid trainer versus someone who's spent time behind a light trainer, to the effect that with marginal training, I find SCA heavy fighters to be easier and safer to train in heavy rapier than SCA, but light fighters in general. Now, there are, of course, exceptions. People like Al, who are just literally exceptional people and put in the hours and the dedication. Al could fight just about anything with anything, but there are always going to be logistics. And I may shoot a video in the near future detailing a discussion on training calibration. It's very important that we discuss it, and it's very important that we understand it, because so many of us train with so many different weapons and styles, to the point where you can see myself and Trilaina, myself and Joe, myself and Jim, who next week for the local folks will be another practice, the 28th. Yes. Jim Robertson will be coming down, so we may get some really good footage, better than my camera, which is doing the thing where it blurs out. Sorry about that, folks. I don't know why it's doing that, but it may be the shirt is a lot for that camera to process. Is it focused wrong? Come on. Sorry, want to give it a chance to calm down its autofocus. Well, we'll figure it out. It gets a little weird when the lighting starts coming from the window and the ceiling fan, but we'll figure these things out. Sword-based discussion. I, for the first time in almost a year, missed both my practices, my drills, and my PT last night, because the night before I was up till 5 o'clock and I had a 10 o'clock show, which means an 8 o'clock wake up time immediately after. So I lost, between that and the heat, I lost a great deal of juice. But I feel, if I were to miss a session, I owe it to you guys to admit it. It's such a rare thing. And yes, I fell asleep fully dressed and had to be woken up enough to get my mask and things on. But we need to be careful with the heat. Oh, I don't know why. This camera was working just fine earlier. Let me try something else. I'm still here. Is that going to be better? Maybe. I don't know. We're having some difficulties here. I think it's just literally the heat of the room right now, because it is dramatically hot. Ooh, that's going to break if I'm not careful. Okay. So, right now I am concerned about what gear we should be practicing in. I'm going to try one other thing to see if I can't fix this. Okay, we'll see if that works. Because if this does that and I do that, it may calm things down. Aha! Mystery solved. Excellent. I am having some broadcast difficulties, so I apologize both for my local problems and the broadcast strength. Weather is weird. Heat is acting up. We have to make it work. So, hence my curls have curls right now. I'm really finding myself revisiting armoring conventions and matters. And it's interesting that this comes up because Trilaina was just able to purchase the fencing hoodie, and I would love to see what she thinks of it when it is not 100 million degrees out like it is now. Part of the reason we do not have practice planned for tomorrow is that it was slated to be over 100 degrees. And given the advanced humidity that we have and the fact that the weather, the scheduled weather and the amount of heat that my property specifically tends to attract are not the same, it's better to give us a week for everyone's safety. It also gives me some time for some preparations and plots. I would never scheme, scam, or plot anything, of course. In further discussion, I actually have, through the assistance of my neighbor, acquired a lawn roller, so perhaps the yard will be actually physically flatter by next weekend. That is my next big hope for the ongoing process of upgrading the facilities. To wit, before I get into any more of that, I do need to go through the chat because I try not to go more than 15 minutes without getting into the chat. So first through the door actually was Foxy. Good evening, Foxy. I hope you are doing well. Followed by Trilaina. Hello. And I am looking into something for you, Trilaina. I can't guarantee, but I'm looking into something because I'm trying to find a low-cost version of something for you. And if I can, I'll pass it along to you. If I can't, I'll just pass the link along to you. And we're joined by Botrix. Hello, Botrix. Always glad to have you in the chat because it is discussion, and we are glad to have it. And Houston, Texas, Dave. Hello. Thank you for your patience. We had a little touch and go getting things settled, but he got the art he commissioned. And thanks for my armadillo doodle art. My daughter loved it. I am so glad. Right now, for more casual commissions, I am still quite open. Larger scale, you need to discuss with me because I am currently trying to broker a deal with one of the larger YouTubers I'm in contact with to possibly design merch. If that turns out to be the case and that goes well, I may be a little busy because it may be investment. But rest assured, the funds that I am earning for that, barring massive emergency in my home, which is always a possibility, are going towards the upgrading of facilities for the local guild. I still have plans where I would like to put up a 20 by 20 carport and possibly upgrade it a bit as time goes on, depending on what kind of funds I'm looking at and making sure everything is hunky-dory with the taxman and the permit office and all that gleeful activity. We'll be doing a lot of the non HFG prep stuff. We have to put a lot of gardens in. They have been in the works, and it's just due. Basically, this weekend is going to be a lot of getting things put together. So I'm hoping that is a benefit to you. It certainly will be a benefit to me. In the event that the 28th is too hot to fight reasonably, I am working on new lighting options. I am also working on making sure that I have a number of throwing weapons that we can practice with and possibly even get some footage of throwing. I am very excited about that. Assuming it works, my personal primary for a library program that's coming up, it came in today, so I'm excited about that. Doesn't really apply to this show, but is something I'm excited about because it came in minutes before the stream started. So I'll be discussing that later on the other channel because many of you may have come to see Nick Knows Nerf and wondered why there wasn't one yesterday. Well, that involved the fact that I went out helping some people, and in the process of helping some people, I may have overdone it in the heat. Hence the collapse. And let's get back into the chat. Hey, Thesis, how are you doing? And I am really, truly glad that your daughter loved the artwork. And like I said, if there's anything else you need or you need it in a different format, maybe even color swapping or something, just let me know. I'll be happy to help. And hello, Kitty. How are you doing, dear? I hope everything is well in the great, wonderful land of Canada. Again, I beseech you to not hold my government against me. And greetings for Kitty, and stay hydrated. Good. There you go. The axe throwing place just opened in our area. Might try it out. That is a wonderful opportunity to safely learn how to throw axes. Speaking of which, I made a acquisition, which I may just have to go fetch as soon as I remember where it is. So I will be right back. I don't have an ad to run, so I will I'll just do this. I will switch brands briefly so that I can run heck, I'll run my ad. I never get to run my ad. All right, thank you for allowing me that brief interlude. Now, for those of you who've been around, this is something that was acquired for me by Steve Clausen from Vulpes. It's Vulpes Tactical, I believe. They're on Etsy. Wonderful, wonderful heavy grade trainers. Personalized. Think of it as a much more expensive / fancier version of the Purple Heart Armory basic trainers. Now, I am talking about this because I acquired something. This many years ago, I was sparring with both Sword Sage. Actually, I was sparring with Sword Sage. I was sparring with let's see, Sword Sage, Al, as you know him. Let's see, Sword Sage, Al, Steve Clausen, and a few others. And I've been using a tactical tomahawk trainer, which I don't have one in reach because, of course, I don't. But understand that it's roughly something like this. But this, of course, is not a trainer. Anyway, and I found myself annoyed because I didn't have enough handle to properly use the tool. But still, I switched from using it as the one-handed hatchet style fighting to a two-handed, actually axe fighting approach, and found it, of course, it was very comfortable. Because it's important to remember that my first actual edged weapon that I considered myself proficient in was an axe. Actually, splitting maul slightly more than the felling axe, but incredibly effective weapon, and I've never neglected it. I'll ask you a question, but I'll tell you no lies. And this has been a tool that I've been very fond of. However, due to our armoring limitations currently, I have to be very, very cautious, and that cautious and axe use are two things that are very difficult. However, it is not something like I said, I've ever neglected or given up. Now, I told people many years ago, as a response to certain things, if they paid attention, I would acquire a very specific axe. And I have since acquired this. This, first off, this is a rubber axe head grip. I will be making a leather axe sheath for it. This is called a boy's axe. It is about 30 inches long, and instead of the 5-pound head you find, this is a 2.5. So it is right between a proper full-size axe and a hatchet head. But this allows me the full range and use of the techniques I'm acquainted with a slightly lighter head to make it easier both for my physique and for my proportions to be able to use this as needed. It is important to understand your skill sets and match your abilities with what you have. The other thing of interest is these are some of the axes that are thrown occasionally at different lumberjack games. I've seen full-size ones, I've seen boys' axes thrown, because when I learned and was first exposed to throwing weapons, they were not in a medieval or LARP setting. They were part of the lumberjack games, and lumberjack games are well, they're self-explanatory. They are competitions of lumberjack-related skills. So you will have the rapid felling of trees with accuracy, two-man saw teams, but you also have single and double bit axe throwing. Now, I don't believe I have tried to throw such an axe in a very long time, and honestly, I'm not sure I still would have it in me. But it is interesting to ponder because this isn't a tool, and it is, again, this is a tool for chopping wood. This is a tool for felling trees. This is a tool for crafting and rough hewing items. When you are out on long distance hikes, which of course I can no longer perform due to my physical limitations, understanding the skill set and applications of an axe is very important. Now, I was in discussion fairly recently, and there was what are you likely to carry if you're going out in a hiking scenario? And everybody tried to go, well, that's Nick, he's a sword guy. He would carry a machete. Now, I am a sword guy, obviously, and a machete is a thing of wonder. However, there are certain things that are much better at doing things. Now, a lot of people go for the lightweight and they go for a hatchet to the point of extremes, like, one moment, let me reach down into my bag of toys. Something like this, which, while intended for throwing, this is a very small Timberwolf throwing axe. The model is 384, isn't it? Let me see. Yes, Timberwolf 384. Very nice axe. I was gifted. And I carried it actually for quite some time. That's why there's still some dirt in it, because I've thrown this many times. And I've used this as a hiking axe for the extreme lightweight. It is literally a baby axe. However, if you're going to use the axe as an axe, you will rapidly find some problems with it because it doesn't carry enough weight to do a lot of splitting. You run the risk of bending it. The paracord, while great for a knife retention or a throwing axe retention, does nothing for impact absorption. And that is something you have to consider. So if I were carrying a hatchet, it would be something more like this, which is a mouse hawk. And this is much more a quote-unquote baby axe. Now, this is much more, if this had a flattened back, this would almost, I'd be tempted to have this right on my belt everywhere I go, because this is a lightweight, effective, I took some really great heavy-grade electrical grip tape and to secure it so it can't slide down as easily. I still have to baton it a little bit to keep it set. But for light axe work, this is a tomahawk. It's just a mouse hawk. I have a full-size tomahawk. Actually, I have several, but none of them are right here. But it's a full-size tomahawk has a thicker handle and about half again to twice as large head. Why do I like this? Well, the benefit of a tomahawk, especially over a traditional axe, is how it's seated. So, I can do something I rarely have the opportunity to. I can show you the difference. Now, a proper axe is seated, behave, where it is hammered down onto the axe handle, which is, the shape of an axe handle like this is a wonder of human ingenuity. The ergonomics of this subtle curve to the belly greatly changes the dynamics of splitting and chopping with this thing. Never think that because an axe is simple and old, it is not actually remarkably advanced, thought-out technology. But once the axe head is hammered in, a wedge of some sort is hammered in to split the axe head and retain the head on the axe, which means periodically you may have to reset that. And when you go to change the axe head for something like this, you're probably going to need another handle of the same size and shape, roughly, and a wedge to reset and go through the whole process. This is not done. This is by Trooper, which is a American-made hickory handle, beautiful, beautiful axe. But I'm not overly fond of the varnish, so I may actually sand the varnish. I may rewrap the sand the varnish off, recoat it with linseed oil or something like that, and possibly even do like a paracord style end grip to further tighten this up. Possibly. Not sure on that one. I also will be making a leather axe sheath. Oh, excellent. And the modern tomahawks are probably something like the SOG, which I can bring back out because, let's see, this is not the Fast Hawk, but probably something like this. This is a modern tomahawk breaching tool. Very, very handy. Very, very good. And hello, Al. I am quite happy fighting with something like this, but as Al knows, I find myself wishing the handle were about that much longer. Soghawk, yep, great hawk. I quite love it for my loadout. I just need to get some weighted plates for my loadout. But for that as an implement, it's very, very good. But for doing traditional axie things, I again keep coming back to this. Now, is it heavier than a camp hatchet and many other options? Frankly, yes. And we have this fixation on traveling light as a mentality. However, I would far rather have something like this where I have enough reach, where I can literally fell a tree. I can split, between using this and some wedges, I could split. I could actually make planks with something like this. It would be a pain, but it's doable. It has enough of a hammerhead that I can drive things in. Right. Light wood chop versus heavy wood chop. Now, obviously, a full-size axe is better. However, I am still 5 foot, between 5'5" and 5'7", depending on my spine alignment. I have been 5'8", and I have been 5'5" in a matter of months, and it literally depends on what joint is where. So, a shorter axe fits my proportions, just like I've spoken many times on making sure that your sword fits your proportions. For me, with my some limit to my strength, having more weight than the lightweight axes, because you have to put more strength to chop with like a tomahawk than you do one of these. The other thing, it comes into the matter of the cross section. Now, a felling axe has a benefit, and if you look, this is designed to split the wood away, not catch, split the wood, because you are literally driving a metal wedge into it. You'll find that like that. You'll find that like that to a lesser extent here, because it starts to get more angled. But then again, a tomahawk is a bit closer in the weapon category. Whereas when you start looking at something like a SOG, Fast Hawk, and I'll pull it out again, and SOG is better than most, you get that wide middle. This is better than a lot of others. I have another hawk that I absolutely adore that Trilaina gave me. However, it has a place that it lives where it can be reached a little easier in case it is needed. And it has a very direct round to straight, because it's not really meant for deep penetration of wood. It's more meant for deep penetration of individuals. So you need to keep that in mind. The thing I like about a mouse hawk, as I said, instead of being fitted from the top with a wedge, it's fit from the bottom. And this is an addition I put there because this particular hawk is a little persnickety in the angling towards this particular handle. They don't like each other very well. And I'm going to have to actually take all this off someday and carve this handle a bit. But this can function quite well for lightweight work on a relatively narrow handle. Now, I can lengthen this out without losing too much, to probably double it if I really needed to. But in the event of me being in the woods, yes, use it to debark a tree. Absolutely. This handle breaks, I can easily replace it. Now, if we are looking for the more survivalist mentality, and Nick, I thought this was the Historical Fencing Guild. This is historical fencing. We have to start to understand what people actually carry when we are looking at self-defense and why we train in styles. This breaks, I can easily replace the handle. From a practical forging mentality, this takes a lot less metal. That means it's cheaper. If it has to be replaced, it will cost less to replace it. It will take less time to replace it. And in reality, the size and general weight of this is far closer to a lot of what a period battle axe would be, rather than the great big dwarven double-bladed things people envision when I say battle axe. This actually would make, and I would love to do it. I may actually go down and get a second one. The cheapest place I found to get this particular axe, it was by the Missouri Tool Company, I want to say. Is, believe it or not, Bass Pro Shop of all places. It was like 20 something. It was on sale. So I got it for less than that. I want to say it was like 23 regularly, and I got it for like 16, 17, somewhere in there. But I would love to take one of these and instead of putting it on the handle that it comes with, make a walking stick and make essentially a focus. Make a shepherd's axe with it. And then do some experimentation to see just how sturdy one would be. It would take time to both acquire another one of these, because I'm not going to mess up a perfectly good rig if I don't have to, which I'm sure everyone here can understand. But need to know if that's, does that sound like something you'd like to see? Because they are mentioned in a book I keep meaning to buy. One of the saber manuals has focus at the end, and I need to read what they have to say about it, because I walk with a stick anyway. And while I prefer simply walking with a stick 90+% of the time, having an axe or spearhead is something that tempts me. And we will be getting into a little bit of spear training as well in the fairly near future, because I secured both a cold steel spearhead and a broomstick, a tapered head broomstick. So I will be permanently affixing these two fellows together and just seeing how well that works. A lot of people complained about excessive flexibility in the spearhead. That sounds like a good idea to me. So we're going to see how that works. But I would like to do one of those because, again, for me, you would have a neck knife, and your neck knife would be shavable sharp, which this is not because I use it all the time. I need to sharpen this. A work knife, which in this case, my favorite for pure aesthetics is this ancient Mora knife I acquired. This is what a Mora 503 used to look like. And I really like the handguard because it makes it a little bit safer. But this is quite sharp. Oh, this is shavable sharp. That's nice to know. But quality Swedish knife that, could I baton with this? Yes, I could. But why on God's green earth would I, when instead of batoning I could use the knife as a knife and simply carry an axe that I use as an axe. It does not have the minimalist approach, but it's also important to understand who I am and what kind of situation we're talking about. In D&D terms, due to my personal lower strength and lower constitution, I'm not going to be able to ever do a fast march for any length of time. It's just not mechanically possible. I could go for a very long time at a consistent speed, but if I'm going at a consistent speed and I'm going to be carrying gear already, it seems only logical that I would carry gear that actually does the job. I understand my selections are not particularly tactical to a great number of people, but I find from a measure of situational awareness and, frankly, situational likelihood, I am far, if I go out in the woods, and I got in the woods with this axe for any length of time, theoretically overnight if I can get my breathing situation straightened out or something like that. All right. If I go out with this, I am 99% of the time or better, especially currently, going to be using this as a tool to process wood, either for carpentry purposes, all your big cuts, or for firewood processing. That's what this is good at. That's what it's designed for. In the, shall we say, 1% of time, I need a tool of self-defense that I haven't prepared something else for. This is more than adequate. This is a perfectly adequate door greeter. It also bears the wonderful deterrent factor of we equate axes with psychopaths in America. So there's a deterrent factor. Good to know. But when we process these, we have to then look at historically what our forefathers and foremothers would have carried and had access to and be likely to use at given points in given times in history. And as we have discussed, and many people realize, the sword is an expensive, it is a weapon that is associated with a great many social norms. So throughout history, the owning or wearing of a sword, excuse me, has been fairly limited. But throughout history, poor people have had to carry axes. And there's where we get to the interesting point. Military. Now, when one goes to study martial arts, the term martial has to do with military, has to do with warfare. However, I personally, while I find the military art versions of the arts fascinating, I have and will almost always be more interested in either small unit or individual weapons of defense. Because, one, a large number of gear types require a certain amount of maintenance. They require followers. Throughout history, there have always been the people who are the tip of the spear and the vast quantities of people necessary to support them. And what is carried and deployed by those people is often radically different than what would be carried and deployed by an individual on their lonesome or with their families. Now, I am not a military man. I am not made of the physical stuff necessary to function in the military. I have the highest respect for them. However, if there were ever a situation that required me to join the military, as a number of things have gone hideously wrong, I've reached a point in my life where I no longer have much fear of a draft for myself. That leaves to say, again, what am I more likely to deal with from any given situation? I am more likely to deal with a defensive situation because I'm not going to go offensive. I simply do not have the equipment, training, or motivation to do so. I am not someone who is minded or motivated to go start trouble. It's just not who I am. I am far more likely to take care of my home and keep my head down, unless desperately needed to. But I have not the time nor ability to gain the kind of skill set necessary to be useful in traditional military roles anyway. And because I carry that mentality, and it's so ingrained in me, my approach to historical fencing and historical trainings and historical weaponry goes to similar avenues, similar roads. This is why I favor short swords. Now, yes, my favorite sword is 1783 Charles the Third, or is it Charles the Fourth? I flip it. This is a wall hanger version. Shot gas port. It's actually a broadsword. I know. The fencers will have a fit, but it would be something like this. Relatively short, relatively effective. This is why I have a certain love for Messers. This is why I have a irrational affection towards assorted Dassics, because these are the edged weapons of the working class. These are the edged weapons of the poor. Now, I do also hold to certain fencing swords and certain related weapons, small swords, certain rapiers, things like that. But remember, these are not primarily military weapons. These, again, are weapons of defense. For the same reason, I quite like both the Jin and the Dao, but the Jin is easier. It's a simple matter of it's easier for me to wield and more effective. Although the Dao gets a little interesting because I've got saber background. But I'm rarely a longsword guy, because a longsword can never really be toolified. Sure. I mean, you could be weaponized, but can you be toolized? Toolified? Toolification? Anyway, looking into that, I'm far more likely to carry something like a German hunting sword, a sawback sword, because that's literally a very pretty machete. And you use it for processing wood, which, again, it's doable. You can use a heavy machete. If you look at the Japanese hatchets, most of them are far more resembling meat cleavers than they are what we think of as axes. And it's fascinating, again, to see. But for me, and perhaps it is my limited imagination, I cannot and I do not find comfort in stepping out of my character classes that far most of the time. As always, I like to make them go, and I've studied longsword to an extent because it translates better to Joe staff length or walking stick length than even I am happy to admit. It's a very useful tool to integrate and reverse engineer into the staff instead of using the staff to train that style. It's just a matter of building personal versatility. But for me, my style when I am training in weaponry will always have this bizarre air of practicality. I don't know if that makes sense to what I am referring. I don't know if that resonates with any of you. Because for many people, learning the weapons of the military is a way to tie back to it, especially I found with veterans. Many veterans I know are very comfortable in studying the styles and techniques of the military over styles of personal defense. And there is some merit there. Because when you were looking at the manuals, the military manuals of yore tend to be very practical, very straightforward, very understandable. That's why at one point I was attempting to learn the 7-point style of, God, I cannot remember which Chinese era. I'd have to go back into it, which was basically 7 moves, very limited in the form of a kata, but very practical. Something you could do daily, keep yourself in form, and the muscle memory will just go. Unfortunately, my VCDs got messed up. And yes, that dates me and my studies. Huge shout out to Sword Sage for getting me dabbled in that. But I would love to hear in the comments, either throughout this particular broadcast or later, what styles appeal to you? Why do you want to study them? I admit a lot of what I studied early on was because of Zorro and because of, I was always more interested in D&D characters where I felt I could actually do the kind of things characters do. Now, this is in the era before super heroic fantasy games like 5th edition, where it was a bit simpler and a bit more coarse, but also more obtainable. So, because of that mild interest, I did pick up a number of crafting and skill-based hobbies that I find useful to occasionally keep a toe in. I would rather have a little bit of experience in something, in everything, than be just, a master of one specific thing. Versatility and generalization has been my preferred mental approach. But again, I want to know what you guys are interested in. I want to know what drives you guys to fight, what drives you guys to train. Now, for example, I do enjoy skirmish level tactics. I enjoy skirmish level situations. But I don't like to go much higher than that. I don't ever want to fall into what I consider the Napoleon trap, where Napoleon was very good at leading a fairly small group of people against overwhelming odds using trickery and skill. But when he started having to command a full battlefield, full armies, it was beyond, I feel, his level of competence, hence Waterloo. Not that he wasn't brilliant, he was still brilliant. But, the most brilliant violinist in the world might not be comfortable on a bass cello. It may be a bit much for them. And the greatest violinist in the world may not be at all comfortable leading an orchestra. They are related but very separate skill sets. And people lose track of that as a concept. Which is why, again, for all my tendencies towards creativity, I do find a man, my dad had a saying, a man has got to know his limitations. And I've said it in part so that you can attempt to surmount them, to transcend your limitations, but in part so that when it comes time to tactically and situationally assess what's going on, you can do so and not delude yourself into believing you have abilities which you simply don't. I have found a great many people have, for example, great many men who I've seen surveys believe that they could indeed fight a bear. And I would say to an extent it depends what breed of bear, and what you define fighting as. The fact that most men, well, not most, but a large number, believe they can hold their own against any number of large animals that they've never encountered speaks to the fallacies of overconfidence which run rampant in modern society. I have some theories about this. The lack of a proper ritual to transition from boyhood to manhood. Sociology and psychology get real weird real fast in this area. Thus, it's fascinating. But that's why many times you find more practicality in people who've been exposed to things. My goal has always been, since I've been very, very young, to not be the one to touch the hot stove again. When I was very, very little, my very first word was born of my parents having a pot-bellied wood-burning stove and my mom pointing at it and saying hot. And me being very, very young, and my mom pointing at it and saying hot. And not don't touch, hot. And being a child, I reached up and I touched it. And I burnt my hand and cried and stuff. As soon as mom reached for the stove, hot, and trying to warn her. This simple and formative bit of logic has guided me very well throughout life, in that if I see someone encounter something that does not serve them well, and I can see the ramifications of that encounter, be it substances, be it individuals. Yes, Trilaina, my dear, pain is quite the teacher. I feel I don't like pain. I go through quite a bit of it daily. It takes quite a bit of assorted things to keep me functional at the level of pain I go through. I need no more. Therefore, I try to avoid it within reason. And if I can witness someone else burn their hand, I know not to burn mine, which is delightful because it encourages me to pay attention, because I never know when someone's going to unexpectedly burn their hand on something. So this all brings me back to why I take such a simple, such a practical approach to a great many skills and martial arts. I admire the people who have the ability to do the elaborate martial arts. I am in awe of them. And I by no means demean or berate or speak ill of any of that. But I also know that such elegance and such refinement and such grace very often is beyond my physical capacity. There is no small amount of weight to the fact that I am literally and medically a hunchback. Not obviously so, not dramatically so, but functionally more than enough to ensure my head is almost always down just a bit. And perhaps that is a life-saving bit of forced humility. I do not know. But what I do know is understanding oh, Trilaina, my heart. Oh, Trilaina, my heart. Oh. If there was ever a comment you've shared, and I mean this wholeheartedly, there's not a iota of sarcasm in this, but if there's ever been a comment that you've shared that explains why I love you so very much. Trilaina said, originally started fighting because I wanted to fashion myself after a Renaissance gentleman. What excellent, excellent. Now it's the idea of people should always fight for those who cannot. You are far more noble a soul than the world is ready for. And I delight in your every accomplishment, my dear. Now, we have some gobbledygook on someone who is totally not about trying to get me to buy subscribers. On the off chance that there is a human behind that pile of gobbledygook, which I am certain there is not, I will never, ever pay to have my stream motivated that way. I will never pursue such services. It will be organic or it won't happen. Does that mean my growth will be somewhat staggered and limited? Yes. To the people asking when am I going to get subscribers and stuff, I will. I have been having a little bit of difficulty getting some background tax information for Kick. Once that is up, I will be setting up the whole subscribers and bonus chats and all those wonderful things. Hopefully, I've never engaged in that. I will be studying how to do it. But yes, I have no problem admitting it. When I seriously took up the sword, because I trained personally out of interest and curiosity and, all the fun stuff, I took up the sword to learn to control my anger. I took up the sword to learn to control my reaction to the traumas I had endured and as a statement of never again. And almost immediately into my training, I saw that the gatekeeping of knowledge and assessment was being used to bully and, frankly, oppress others on bases of gender, religion, ability, physical ability, race. And instantly that offended me to my core. Now, I do have a rather exaggerated sense of justice, so that set me on a delightful path where I've been just trying to help folks who can't be able to fight for themselves. And I do that because I have not the capacities to take take on the duty of protecting everyone that I should. I just can't. And the confession that I can't protect them all is a wound that will never stop bleeding. However, the only way I can treat it, the only way I can bandage it, is to help all those that I can, to the best of my ability, to reach the best of their ability and pursue beyond. And I think that is the core of the spirit of the Historical Fencing Guild, even deeper than the providing a place where martial artists of all schools and caliber may interact freely. I am not always so noble a creature as Trilaina, and I certainly have not always been so noble a creature as Trilaina. But I hope that in my penance I have been of service. And the belief in that potential fact is what lets me sleep at night. We have a lot to train in today, folks. And it is vital that everyone learn to do what they can with what they have. And I know that's difficult, especially when there are so many forces that discourage that kind of activity, so many forces that draw away from that kind of activity, there's so many forces that would repress and strangle and remove that kind of activity. But the sad fact is, Lena says, don't know. I would call me noble, just want to see a little light sometimes. It always terrifies me when you read from my script that well. There are reasons we get along. But, wow, that one actually derailed my thought for a moment. Doing what we can with what we have. I do not ever ask for perfection. I do not ever ask for excess. But I understand that if one were to look at the amount of effort necessary versus the reward, it takes considerably less effort to get a B in a class than trying to get an A. Getting an 80% is infinitely easier, it seems, than getting a 100%. Now, I will always encourage you to reach for 100 if you can, if you dare. But I will always say it is far better to reach for that 100 from a position of 80. And understanding that, and that ratio, 80 to 20, happens constantly when you begin to analyze the twos and fro's of life. Thank you, Thesis. Thesis says the noblest people don't think they're noble. The most arrogant claim that they are. I want to see you try. And I want to see you succeed. And if I can help, that's what I'm here for. And that's what I'll be here for next week at 8 p.m. on next Friday, right here on the Historical Fencing Guild channel on YouTube, and of course on the Nick T _artist Kick and Twitch. I believe I'm under that. My names don't all line up, but I'm easy to find anyway. It has reached the hour where I have to bid you adieu. So I want you guys to remember to do your drills, keep your guard up, be kind to yourself and each other. And as always, friends, thank you for supporting your local swordmaster. I got some surprises I'm trying to set up for next week. Ahead of practice, we shall see. Next Saturday, we should have a practice with at least James Robertson planning to come down, which should be delightful. I, of course, hope to see Trilaina and Joseph and anyone else who's local who can make it. Beyond that, I do have the footage from last practice. I, however, have had the difficulty in my phone defaults to so high a file size that it can be difficult to get to speak nicely with YouTube. So I have to do some settings on there. But I have a great match to do, and it is very, very hot in here. So I will be bidding you adieu. Good night, all.